Easy answer, not much. Um, People don't even like to talk about it because there's this American dream presumption that if you're committing a crime and going to jail, you made bad choices, you're a bad person, you didn't take advantage of all the things that were available in the United States. So we don't really care whether there's a school to prison pipeline because we provided the school. You misappropriated, you didn't study, you made bad choices, you're in prison. The hell with you. There are there are things that we should be talking about. Three strikes, war on drugs, penalty and processes that have filled our jails and made us, one of the most incarcerated countries on the face of the earth per capita and in raw numbers. And recognizing that when you do put a disproportionate number of people in jail, that has repercussions for their children and their relatives and creates intergenerational problems. So I think it's oversimplistic to think if we taught differently or had different standards in school, all these people wouldn't end up in prison. That presumes schools are accomplishing what we pretend they accomplish. We have a lot of people in prison because we have a lot of problems in our criminal justice system. We have a lot of poverty. We have all kinds of perverse incentives in our society. It is unfortunate that there is a correlation between dropping out and ending up in prison. It's a good predictor, but it's asking the wrong question. So the easy answer is we don't really care as a society that there's a school to prison pipeline. We don't really care.
I had somebody tell me years and years ago, why do people sell drugs? Because they need the money. If I want to try to do something about over-incarceration, I need to do something about why so many people have to do things or come to have to do things that land them in jail. I mean, the school to prison pipeline gets so accelerated the more so-called resource officers I see in a school. It is almost like perfect parallel kinds of stuff for the number of police officers in a school to the number of students who end up in the criminal justice system for things that they've done at school. This might today be the single greatest privilege of like suburban or relatively affluent schools over urban schools. It's the fact that if you do something that is a crime, it gets treated like you're a kid and like you're working to learn things. And so I create this pedagogically sound sort of response to what you did. As opposed to, right, what tends to happen to young people of color, say that kindergartner who kicked her teacher in the shins, who got charged with assault, right, who got pulled out of her kindergarten classroom by the school resource officer in handcuffs. Who handcuffs a 5-year-old? That's the school to prison pipeline. Cops aren't trained to be pedagogically sound, to think about special learning needs, to think about like how hard things might be at home right now and about how you might not actually, like, as a young person, know what to do with all of those emotions. So you might need to do something with them and like vent them out and like try that out a little bit in school. And so it might make you actually like hit somebody when you wouldn't normally hit somebody. Well, a cop isn't trained to do any of those kinds of background sorts of pieces. The cop is trained. You hit somebody, that's assault, that's a crime, you need to be prosecuted. We also have police officers that rotate in and out. So lots of times, police officers who do actually like have commitments to youth and stuff like that, right? It's very, very rare for them to be there, say the whole time that you're in high school, like 4 years running, you have the same school resource officer. When I look at where resource officers go, urban working class schools are going to have a disproportionate number of school resource officers. Lots of suburban and more affluent schools might not have any. The biggest thing that I think at a school level that we could agitate for is getting cops out of schools and stop calling the cops for things that happen in school. I've, all but yelled this at a couple different principals that I'm thinking about right now. Stop thinking like a cop and think like a principal. Stop thinking like a cop and think like a teacher. Get the cops out of schools. That's going to be the most impactful thing that we could do at a building level to push back on this. Why is that so hard to realize? The thing about school resource officers is they almost never come out of the school budget. And so if I'm short on my cash for security officers, right? We have these cops who come for free, right? Because they're paid as police officers rather than coming from the district. And now I become really, really reliant on police officers being in my school for my different kinds of disciplinary responses. And it becomes normal. If there's an altercation in my classroom as a teacher, I'm supposed to pick up the phone and dial whatever the number is for the school resource officer, not to de-escalate or to call the principal or to try to remove the students and get one out of the room and get another one in there, right? I mean, these are funny kinds of things, right? Like old school teacher education. We used to actually take classes on how to de-escalate conflicts. For the most part now, teachers are taught like explicitly, this happens, call the cop. I want to be conscious that it's far easier for me to say, get the cops out of our schools than for a lot of schools to realize, because they've become gradually more and more dependent on police officers standing in for, security kinds of protocols that we see in abundance in more affluent schools, and we become disproportionately reliant on police in urban schools, and that whole system accelerates the school to prison pipeline.
From a sort of macro political perspective, what are taxpayers interested in paying for? I think they worry a lot more about crime than they worry that lower income kids aren't getting a complete education. So crime impacts them. What's their response? Punishment and policing, not prevention. First of all, they believe that everybody's getting an equal chance to start anyway, so you don't have to coddle these kids by where, they've had an equal chance, so we're going to police them and we're going to punish them. You can peg what it costs to keep someone in maximum security prison by about the tuition of Harvard. Why are we spending it at the back end instead of the front end? As a society, we seem much more motivated by punishing and by God, holding these kids to these middle-class standards that we abide by. Why can't they abide by them and throw them in jail? Not recognizing that it's costing us as much, if not more, to do it that way. Where if we spent this on prevention at the front end, we wouldn't have jails filled with people. And as taxpayers, we might not have as big a tax bill. Part of it, I think, is we believe in this, Horatio Alger American dream thing that everybody has an equal chance and the schools provide it. And that's so imbued in us that we can't let that go.
How else could we justify all the inequality that we see around us, Mark, if we didn't believe in that, and if we didn't teach that over and over and over and over?
Exactly.